Is the key to the Badgers transfer portal offseason already on the roster? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate the everydayers. Today's episode, we're talking about the returning pieces on the roster. Is the key to this offseason already on that roster? Plus, in-state football recruiting and a bunch more. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet hits. Let's get into it because transfer portal season, I was thinking about this the other day. Transfer portal season, we become obsessed with who are the targets. And this is an important conversation. I'm going to do a show tomorrow on a couple key targets, but we get obsessed over who are the targets. How are they going to fix this roster? What are the keys? Who do we got to land? And you forget about some of the returning pieces. Not the shiny ones, right? Everybody, Blackwell and Winter, but you forget about some of the other returning pieces that could just step up and fill some of those roles. Not everything has to get fixed by the transfer portal, is my point. And I think as fans, as someone who I felt guilty of this as well, we start to look at the transfer portal as like the Band-Aid to fix everything. There's a lot of pieces on this roster coming back next year or incoming in this high school recruiting class. We all remember that, right? High school recruiting. You know how it used to be for 1,000 years in college football and basketball before the portal. There's three pieces coming in this high school recruiting class. And this is a program, John Blackwell among them, Nolan Winter, they will play freshmen if freshmen are ready. So there's some answers potentially coming in high school or that are already on the roster that we need to talk about. So we're just going to go through them all, every single one of them. Who might be an answer on this team? I'm going to start with the most obvious one. 2 years ago, this player averaged 14 points a game, 5.8 rebounds per game, shot 38% from three at a D1 level. That guy's Xavier Amos. And then he gets to Wisconsin, and it's not the year anybody envisions. But remember, 2 years ago, he was kind of a big deal at NIU. This was a big portal get for Wisconsin. This was by many, myself included, many considered this the crown jewel of last year's transfer portal class, Xavier Amos. Athletic, 4, can shoot the 3, can space, will block some shots, shot 38% from 3, decent from the line, grabbed 6 rebounds a game. This guy's an insta starter. And then he has the year he just had where two or 3 points a game, under 10 minutes a game, and you're just kind of like, but that version of him 2 years ago is still there. The tools that we got excited about are still under the hood. I used this analogy before, but sometimes you're looking for the pieces under the hood. You can polish everything else. He's still got the athleticism, the shooting touch, the ability to run the floor like a deer, the ability to switch on defense, the ability to provide some rim protection. All that's still there. It didn't go away. So it's possible you go from NIU, which wasn't very good the last year he was there, in a conference that's kind of meh, up to the Big Ten, and it just takes you a year to adjust. That's okay. When I left high school to the Navy, it took me a year to adjust or more. It took me a minute to go from a delinquent kid who barely went to high school to someone who was a successful Navy guy. Like, it takes some time, and not everything happens right away. So I think one of the biggest pieces on this roster, one of the biggest potential answers is Xavier Amos, because if he can figure it out, if he can have a really good offseason, and by the way, we're not going to talk about anybody leaving or staying until they leave or stay. So up at this point, I'm just going to assume that everybody that's on the roster is going to stay on the roster. Is that likely? No. I mean, I've heard smoke in places, but it is what it is. So I'm assuming all these guys are back for now because that's where they're at right now. They haven't entered the portal. So if you get a really good offseason year from Xavier Amos, and he returns more to the form of that guy at NIU, where maybe it's not 14 points a game, but maybe it's 10, 11 points a game, shooting 38% from 3, spacing the floor, grabbing 5-6 rebounds a game. If it's 90% of that, so it's 10 points and 5 rebounds a game with floor spacing, man, that's a valuable piece. And that's a piece you no longer have to go get in the portal. What is his role on this team? I think that's really tricky because I think he's a 4. Just like I think Nolan Winter's a 4. I don't want Winter playing the 5. I've talked about that a bunch. I don't think that front line is physical enough if it's Winter and Amos, but you could play some small ball 5 with. You could find the minutes for Amos, is my point. If he stays, he can suck up the Janicki minutes, or not the Gilmore minutes. Some of those he can suck up minutes as a small ball 5, right? You could stagger him and Winter at the 4. So if Winter plays 30 minutes a game, you can give the other 10 to Amos. You can suck up a lot of Amos's minutes from Gilmore. A lot of those minutes can go to him. You can find a path pretty easily to 20 minutes off the bench for Xavier Amos if that is what it is. And maybe it is a case where Winter gets a little bit bigger. He got bigger from a freshman to a sophomore. Maybe he puts on more weight. He's the 5, and then Amos is your 4. My bigger point here is don't write off Xavier Amos, because there were moments this year where defensively against Minnesota and Dawson Garcia, he showed great flashes. There were moments this year where he showed all those tools that we were so excited about. They're still there. And I think this is still a potential quality Big Ten forward that could step in and play a much bigger role next year. So I think that's the biggest one you got to look out for. If he can do that, that gives you either a really good bench 4 or 5, or maybe even a starter. I wouldn't prefer the starting role, but if he can give you the bench forward minutes, be the primary backup at the 4 and the 5, play 20, 22 minutes a game in that role, that could be super valuable. So Amos is the first one I want to talk to as the type of guy that maybe some of these internal options are there and they fix some of the options without you having to go into the portal. So let's get to the next one. Daniel Freitag. Freitag, man, we all know the story. 3-star, 4-star, dual sport athlete, big time athlete. Hops, strength, physicality, speed, gives you the type of athleticism in the backcourt that we were really excited about, but it just didn't click this year. And when he played, he looked a little out of sorts. I think that's fair to say. I expected him to play a bigger role this year. A lot of people did. I think he did. And I think maybe we needed to go back and look at the fact that he was a dual sport athlete. He got injured playing football. He didn't have as much developmental time as a lot of other pure basketball guys that are going to camps all year. He was playing football. He broke, I think, his collarbone, right? So I think there's a chance he was just more raw than we anticipated, but there's a lot of physical tools there. And that's another player. This team needs depth in the backcourt. Cameron Hunter has entered the portal. You obviously lost Klesmit. You lost Kamari. You lost Tanjay, who obviously was more of a 3, but still had a lot of ball handling responsibility. You need more guys in the backcourt. Freitag with this athleticism, definitely a potential answer there. Let's get into Jack Robeson. Robeson is a guy who I feel like with a really good offseason could step into the Jack Janicki type role this year, where 10 minutes a game, space the floor, be a little switchable defensively. He can really shoot it. So Jack Robeson, just to give you the 30-second refresher, he's going to be a redshirt freshman next year. He's 6'6". He's listed at 6'5", 6'6". I think he's more like 6'7" now. I think he's grown a little bit, maybe even bigger. Really good shot. This is a dude who can stretch the floor, great range, quick release with 6'6", 6'7" length on the wing. He's a lefty, good feel for basketball. Not a great athlete, but definitely the type of guy who can stretch the floor, score in a couple different ways. I think he has a role in college basketball because he has height, he's a lefty, and he can shoot. Honestly, it's like being a lefty that can throw 92. You're going to find a role in baseball. If you're a lefty that's like 6'7" and can shoot, you're going to find a space in basketball. I think there's a role here. Will it be next year? It'll depend on how quickly he can pick up the other things, how good he is defensively. Can he be average defensively? Because this scheme and this system definitely fits the type of player he is now. So Robeson, definitely somebody to track this offseason. With a big offseason, he could step right into a backup role, come off the bench, spacing the floor, giving you some minutes at the 3 where, again, you're losing a Tanjay, and Gilmore had some minutes at the 3. You're losing pieces there. He could step in and take some of those minutes. The next one up, Ricardo Greppi. So Greppi came in last year's class. Again, the 30-second refresher, 6'11", 6'10", overseas, Italy, 255 pounds, big kid. Legit size, and you can't teach size. Size is hard to find. I think he's got a little ways to go from a skill perspective. I think ideally, if you can get 5 to 10 minutes next year, if he can be a backup 5, that just gives you some physicality. I think that's a win. That would be my hope and optimism for Ricardo Greppi. But again, that's a potential answer. If you can get 5 to 10 minutes as a backup 5, that's a potential answer. And that gives you some depth and some size and physicality in the paint after losing Steven Crowell. Maybe that allows you to be a little smaller if you can go to a Greppi who can give you a little more size. And then the other one I want to just bring up, so those are players that really didn't play as either a big role or as big a role this year as we had anticipated. The other one's Nolan Winter, because Nolan Winter played 21 minutes last year. You got to think with the absence of what they're losing with Crowell leaving, they're going to get Winter up to about 30 minutes. So there's another gear there too. There's a lot of potential answers on this roster where you don't have to fix everything in the portal. I think the big one is Amos. I think the big one is Winter taking a big step. And then one of those other players emerging as a depth guy that takes needs that if those things happen, those are things that guard can go to his transfer portal shopping list and just cross things off and say, well, I don't need that. Turns out I don't need that backup wing because maybe Robeson stepped up, or that backup point guard because maybe Freitag stepped up. Or maybe I need a starting five, but I don't need the backup five because Greppy stepped up. Those are big deals. Depth matters. We saw it at the end of this year. We saw it at the end of last year. We've seen it for several years. Depth matters. All right, we're going to take a second here, come back and talk about the one freshman coming in that I think can absolutely play a role in this team. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. First, a quick second for our great friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel's been with us for a long time, and right now March Madness is here. There's no better time than to get into the action over on FanDuel, specifically because right now if, you can win $200 in bonus bets if you're a new customer. If your first $5 bet wins, that's $200 in extra cash you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I love FanDuel because it's easy to use. Please do it responsibly, but it is fast. It's simple. The payouts are incredible. The user interface is so simple and slick, and you get your money right away, which a lot of other places, it's tough. You have to like call people, and it's a whole thing. FanDuel, it's fast. It's simple. It's easy. Right now, the FanDuel app, simple to use. And when I win, again, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around to visit FanDuel.com. Get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right. Let's talk about the class coming in. And I teased at the beginning. I want to start with Zach Kinzinger. I think Kinzinger of this class coming in, I think he's the guy that can play right away and potentially play a role that matters. And this is something great guard. I actually give guard a lot of credit for. He's okay playing freshman. Some coaches are more stubborn with it. I think Bo Ryan was more stubborn with it. John Blackwell played right away. Nolan Winter played right away. John Lure played right away. He is very comfortable playing people right away. Kinzinger comes in. So Kinzinger, the guard coming out of Wisconsin, 6'3", 185 pounds, good size. I've met him. I saw him in person. I talked to his coach. He's the type of guy who physically he looks okay. He looks like he could compete right now in the Big Ten, and not get bowled over, not get physically dominated. He has to get stronger. He has to get a little bigger, a little faster, but he could hold his own. The thing I like about Kinzinger, there's two things I really like about Kinzinger that when I sit down and say, could he play a role next year? The things I always look for is, does he have a carrying skill set that matters? And can he do the little things? Because if you're coming in as a freshman, unless you're a Sam Decker, unless you are, Wisconsin has had a lot, but unless you're a Devin Harris, Michael Finley, you got to be able to do little things and fit into the rotation to be a glue guy if you're going to play right away as a freshman. So like I said, it's carrying skill set, and can he fit into what they need him to do? The first one is a carrying skill set. He absolutely has it. He's a really good shooter. Much like Robeson I just talked about, Kinzinger can light it up. Quick release, great balance. One of the best things I saw about watching him in person, coming off screens, pin downs, he gets his feet underneath him and shoots with incredible balance. He's not fading away, sliding to the left, right. A lot of people, a lot of young shooters, a lot of older shooters with movement shooting, they have a hard time staying on balance, keeping their shoulders square. He's really good at that already. Good stroke, quick release, deep range, shooting plays in college basketball. Shooting plays in the NBA, shooting plays in this sport now. It's a very big deal. And especially with this scheme that Greg Gard and Kirk Penny have transitioned to, if you can shoot, you already have a leg up, and he can shoot. So you're going to check that box. The other thing I really like about Kinzinger, talking to his coach specifically said he's a glue guy. He came in and instantly wanted to guard the other team's best player, wanted to be a glue guy, wanted to be a locker room guy, a culture guy. He didn't have to be the man right away. His whole family is a family of hoopers. His older brother, Johnny Kinster, plays at Illinois State. He's got an older brother than that that's a hooper. His dad's a hooper. A family of hoopers, they tend to have hooper intelligence. They tend to have hooper IQ. And what I mean by that is they know how to play the game. They know spacing. They know running back in transition. They're pointing and screaming at who to take who. Watching him play, he just understands basketball at a level that's probably a little more advanced than a typical freshman coming into a college program. I think those things allow his shooting to play up. I think he's going to be fine being the 7th, 8th man off the bench. He's going to play defense. He knows how to communicate. He knows spacing. And he's had two older brothers that probably spent years beating him up. Even though Johnny Kinzinger, his middle brother, is smaller than him, he's been the youngest brother in a family of hoopers. So I think there's an IQ intangibles aspect there. From in-state, can shoot the ball, really good ball handler. I question a little bit at times him getting in the paint. We're going to have to see how he can finish against bigger athletes. That is something I saw when I watched him, but he still got in there. So, but again, you're not going to ask him to do that year one. You're going to ask him to come out there, give us a few minutes, play hard defense, understand your role, and space the floor with your ability to shoot the ball. He can do all those things. I really think he can do all of those things. And it's, can you give us some depth and length in the rotation, length in the lineup? Kinzinger is a 4-star recruit, so he's got recruiting pedigree. I really think he could play a role next year, coming off the bench and giving shooting, giving some spacing, giving some toughness and some IQ. And, maybe it's a Showalter type of player. Maybe it's a Pritzl type of a player. Probably not quite as athletic as Showalter, but I think early on he can be that type of piece, and that type of piece is really valuable. A shooter off the bench, you need more of those. So that's Kinzinger. That's the guy who I think can play right away next year. The other two guys in that class, I think, are more of stash and develop plays. Let's start with Will Garlock. 7 foot, 235 pounds. Saw him play a couple times. Talked to his coach. There's a couple things to really like here. Again, I mentioned it with Greppy. Garlock's even bigger, I think. Having seen Garlock in person, having seen Greppy in person, I think Garlock's bigger. And he moves well. So he's 7 foot, 230, and 230 with some pretty fluid movement skills. I think you have maybe more of a potential rim protector here, a guy who has a little more defensive versatility, maybe a little bit more of an out-of-positional rebounder. When I talk about a guy like Greppy, Steven Crowell is this way. They're basically positional rebounders. They're going to get the rebounds that come to them, but they're not going to go out of position to get boards. That's just not their game. I think Garlock can give you some of that. I think he will go out of his zones to get rebounds a little bit because I think he's a little more athletic. He's a little springier. I like him. Not an elite athlete, but a good athlete at legit 6'11", 7 foot size. The problem is, and why I wonder if he's going to be able to play right away, is he played a lot of zone in high school. Their high school program played a lot of 2-3. They would just put him in the middle. He doesn't have I don't think he has as many reps. I mean, certainly play AU, but I think he's going to need reps defensively to cover the pick and roll, to be able to hedge and recover, to be able to drop and play that kind of that momentary 2-on-1 where you find yourself in a bad spot as a center. He's going to need those minutes. And he's coming off an injury this year, so he didn't play as much. I just think he needs reps and developmental time offensively and defensively. From a skill perspective, he's a pretty good passer. I actually really liked his ability to pass out of a double, triple team. But his ability as a ball handler to create shots in the post, his ability to shoot from the perimeter, I think those are all areas where Garlock has to get better. So I don't think he's going to be ready next year. Again, on this, I would love to be wrong. Liked him, met him, great kid. I think he's a guy who's probably a year away. The other one, Hayden Jones. Hayden Jones coming from New Zealand, again, that international pipeline, about 6'5", good size, can shoot the ball. I think the fact that he's 6'5" with decent size and can shoot gives him potential, but from the bit of film I saw, he also feels like a guy who might be a year away. He might need a year to acclimate, a year to learn the scheme, learn the system, understand how better to use his size. Like, there's some decent clips of him in AAU circuit, but when you watch some of the national clips where he's on kind of the New Zealand national team, there's some struggles there at times. So I think both those guys are probably a year away. The freshman I would look at most likely would be Kinzinger to be able to play right away. So just looking at this, I think you could get some minutes from Kinzinger, and then in that first segment, you think Nolan Winter steps up, potentially a much bigger, better role for Xavier Amos, and then one of those backups, whether it's Freitag, Robeson, maybe it's Greppy giving you 5 minutes as a backup center. If one of those pieces steps up, you have a deeper bench. And now maybe you're not looking at, originally I said, I think you need 4 guys, which is 3 starters and a bench guy. Well, then maybe you just need a couple starters if those other players step up. Maybe you don't need to need the bench guys. And that makes it easier to focus on, not just from a time standpoint, but from an NIL, an NIL resources standpoint, it makes it easier to go get the guys you need if some of these other core pieces step up. Okay, let's take a quick, and let me know, by the way, let me know in the chat. I'll do a follow-up showing this. Who on this roster, and I say chat, but in the YouTube comments, who on this roster do you think can step up next year? Who on this roster with the incoming freshman guys, the guys on the bench, could step up and play a significantly bigger role next year for this team, where maybe Gregard doesn't have to go to the portal and find a bunch of answers. Maybe you just need to get a couple from the portal. Let me know. I'll do a follow-up show on that. I'd love to get your take on this. All right, we'll take a quick second there. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about in-state recruiting, plus is Nolan Winter actually a star next year? How big of a jump does John Blackwell have to take? All that and more coming up next on Locked On Badgers.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team, every day.
All right, so I talked a little bit about this the other day. Gavin Meyer, the in-state player, in-state offensive lineman going to Minnesota. And I said, man, it's frustrating in the sense of I think if you can recruit the state better, it makes it easier to fill out your classes. I just think you're going to need Wisconsin guys to some degree. I think it builds for a better culture. I think those players are more likely to stay and develop. And I think they're more generally, historically speaking, easier to get. And Craig Fissel brings up the good point. He says, what matters more in football, winning or in-state recruiting? So great question, Craig, and good pushback, because obviously it's winning. And ultimately, I don't really care where the players come from, I guess, as long as we're winning. But we haven't been winning, and it's one of those things where I know the landscape has changed, but if you look historically at the best Badger teams, they're always built upon a contingent of in-state kids augmented by out-of-state recruiting. So I hear the point you're making, Craig. Like if you told me, and by the way, on the offensive line aspect, like I think this point is actually really salient because Wisconsin has recruited really well on the offensive line. So what does it matter that Gavin Meyer goes to Minnesota? It probably doesn't, because you've landed a Haywood and a Mandel and a Corey and a Powell and a Watts and a Davenport and a Cubberly, and you've done really well there. So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter at all, to your point. It just get the good players in. Who cares where they come from and win? I just think historically you're going to get players that elevate the culture, that elevate the locker room, that are more likely to stay in the NIL era if they're from Wisconsin. They just have a different edge about them. So it's a good point. I hear you. To answer your question, winning definitely matters more than in-state recruiting. I just wonder if those two things are kind of tied hand in hand. Like in-state recruiting helps the winning. I don't know. It's definitely a good question. Brian H. says, this is in response to a show I did. I said, I think you have 2 stars coming back. I think Blackwell and Winter are stars. Brian H. says, Blackwell definitely star in the making. Winter, ? Solid starter, potential star, not there yet. He could take a step up or stay what he is. Very fair. Brian, 100%. Very fair. I'm projecting him to be a star next year. And it's based on the metrics that are underneath him. I'm looking at him very much like baseball analytics would look at a pitcher who has, elite RPMs on his curveball and has a swing and miss rate that's elite. You look at the underlying metrics of Winter, his efficiency offensively, his efficiency defensively, his ability to score from 3 different spots. I think the metrics say there's a star here. I don't even say I think. The metrics say there's a star here. Now, what happens to those metrics when we take Nolan Winter and say, we need you to go from 21 minutes a game to 30 minutes a game? You looked at a guy like Blackwell. He took a big jump, and his efficiency outside of 3-point shooting did not drop off dramatically. You look at a guy like Winter, what's it going to look like with another 10 minutes a game? He's got to get a little stronger, but I don't know how much more weight you want to put on him. And, there's a question down here from Thomas Miller that says Winter has to get stronger and develop more stamina. He needs to continue working on his body. I don't think you want him much bigger. And I don't think that's what Thomas is saying, by the way, or maybe he is. Get stronger, develop more stamina. I agree. Like, you need him to be more consistent and more impactful over 30 minutes. There were times last year where he disappeared, but I think he's at a good weight, like a little bit more weight for sure. Get stronger, but I don't want to overstuff Nolan Winter and turn him into like a slower, bigger version. I think his strength is in his athleticism, his ability to get out in transition, his ability to space the floor and drive slower 4s and 5s. I kind of like him at that. So I do agree he needs to be ready for a bigger role next year. That's more stamina, stronger, bigger. Gosh, I kind of like he's listed right now at 7 foot 235. I think if he's 240, 245 is the highest you would really want him. I think he's more of that spot space the floor 4, and I want him to be quick and fast. Another question here. This is from Brian. This is just a comment. He said, like it or not, women's basketball isn't a priority. There isn't any NIL money. If this improves the performance, I'll be very surprised. Speaking of the women's basketball coach that was recently hired, I agree. Women's basketball isn't the priority. And you can certainly argue pragmatically it shouldn't be. You can absolutely argue, why should it be, right? Football and basketball drive the needle. They deliver the most money, the most eyeballs. I wish women's basketball was better, and I wish we put a little more resources there. But I also think women's basketball is a little bit of a prove it type of a program. Like, prove that you can win, and then we'll reward you with NIL money with some resources there. Last one here. This was from Wayne Meyer, who said Blackwell 3-point shooting was down 45 to 32%. Wayne says forget effective shooting percentage, which is the stat I use to reference the fact that Blackwell is still pretty efficient because Blackwell shot really well inside the 3-point line and really well at the free throw line. And Wayne is just saying, well, his 3-point shooting was down. It was, but of course it was going to go down because he shot 45% the year before as like the third or fourth option on that team. Like it was just going to go down. He was going to have a lot more defensive pressure this year, and shooting 45% is unrealistic to anybody not named like Ray Allen or Allen Houston. So I actually don't make as much out of the drop in 3-point shooting as maybe some others. He hits a couple more. He's at like 34%. That's fine. It was bound to regress to the mean. Water finds its level. He's not a 45% free throw or 3-point shooter, and with more volume and more defensive pressure, that was just kind of bound to happen. Now, I think next year you're hoping for a little bit of a bump as he maybe gets a little more reps under him. Maybe he's got a point guard in the portal that can help him get easier shots. So hopefully next year there's a little bit of a bump for Blackwell, but I really wasn't too worried about his dip in 3-point shooting because I think it was more reflective of the fact that defense had more pressure on him. He was taking tougher shots, and I think at times he had a lot of minutes on him and he got a little worn down. So that's my take on that, but love the comment, Wayne, as always. All right, we're going to wrap it there. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. When you're done, go check out Locked On College Basketball, especially with March Madness going on. Isaac Shade, Andy Patton, they got you all covered over the entirety of March. Just it's the most informed college basketball show out there, so be the most informed college basketball fan. On Wisconsin, appreciate y'all so much as always. Thank you for tuning in, and we will definitely talk later.